So now you've ignored our initial advice to just say no comment at the beginning. You've got into this conversation. You don't have command of all the facts. And we say you don't have command of all the facts. You don't have command of all the facts relative to the argument.
Yes.
But you also don't have command of the facts that are not relative to the argument, but the person interviewing you thinks are relevant.
Yes.
And therefore, you can't defend yourself. You don't want to say no comment because that makes you just doesn't make you look good. So what do you do then?
Well, you go back and say no comment in the beginning, right?
Right. Okay. Right. So we can't get
I love the way we introduced to this point. We introduced to us, okay, if you want to ignore what we told you earlier, but okay, right? You're absolutely right. It's going to happen. And look, folks, don't think you're hiding out there. We see you. And we see you secretly craving being interviewed by members of the media and the press. You think it's cool. And that's fine as long as you're prepared for it. But if you're not prepared and cool goes to messy and you weren't prepared for the problem you created, it's unlikely you're going to be prepared for the mitigation afterwards. They know that the media know we're concerned about what they think about us. They know we want to be quoted. They know we want to be seen as knowledgeable. They know we want to be seen as a leader in our firm or industry who are being asked for their opinion. But remember, they're not asking you because you're a leader. They're asking you because they think they can get a quote from you. And here's the key. The motivations of the media are so fundamentally different than ours that most of us has a hard time understanding why the conversation or the interview or whatever goes so much differently than we had expected. That friend standing next to you, listening to the conversation and you ripping on someone or telling somebody how bad your boss is, how bad your boss is. He hears it and he says, boy, that could go on my blog as a relationship to this or that. And then someone else who is at the party comments on that person's blog and says, oh yeah, that was Bob. He said, he was really ripping on his boss, wasn't he? And then suddenly, your boss, who for some reason you friended on Facebook, connects this somehow through your friends or whatever. And now suddenly your boss is saying, hey, what'd you say at that party about me? Because it's pretty clear it was funny or dramatic enough that several people mentioned it in several different media. And I'm wondering, what's my mitigation at this point? But fundamentally, the press and media do not want what we want. They don't want what we want ever, 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 ever. They want traffic. They want sales. They don't want to tout our product. They want the people who read their material to want to know about your product, so they'll come to the media for more information because that's where the value is. And look, what this means is when we get challenged, we have to repeat ourselves and we have to say things like, as I said, and my point here is that, or another one is just to be clear. And look, it's not even wise when challenged, when directly forcefully challenged, to say, I disagree, as that very phrase is considered confrontational and can be totally used out of context. Another thing I've discovered is from my work in politics is that a lot of people today are learning about how to interact with the media based on how elected officials and politicians and people involved in government interact with the media. And the entire governmental structure, at least in the U.S., is based on at least a two-party system, put in more generally internationally, a multi-party or a greater than one party system, which by definition creates conflict. And the media is going to try to make that conflict as interesting as possible. So whatever you do, don't disagree. It is not disagreeing to restate your point when you're being interviewed. And look, if you're thinking, okay, wow, but Mark, they could write Horstman disagrees saying X, Y, and Z again. Well, then I think we're beginning to see the wisdom of no comment, right? And look, here's the thing. This is why training is so important. And this is why firms offer it to the people who they expect to be talking to the press. You're going to feel uncomfortable. We're going to feel uncomfortable doing this, repeating ourselves. It's not normal communication style. It's not polite in a conversation when someone says, well, I disagree. What about this? And then we simply repeat our point. In fact, we've had other casts where we say, if you repeat your point after someone disagrees, you look like you're browbeating them. But folks, this is not a conversation. If we told the media person that we're talking to that we felt like we were in a conversation and this doesn't feel right, they would laugh out loud right in front of us. This is not a conversation. This is an interview. Everything you say to me is an interview. Everything you say is on the record. And again, so if you're thinking that feels awkward to simply repeat what you just said and to not address the negatives even though the negatives that are being presented to you are incredibly stupid and inane, and maybe you'd say to yourself, gee, I'd rather say nothing under the circumstances. Well, that's good. It's one of our recommended techniques. Actually, I think it's our first recommended technique, which is no comment, right?
It sounds like a pattern. It sounds like that no comment thing keeps coming up.
Yeah. And look, folks, we're not saying you can never talk to the media. We're saying know what the risks associated with these various things are and handle it right and start with no comment.
Okay. So I don't understand why you're making such a point of this, because in my experience, isn't the media just reporting? Aren't they just out there collecting facts and reporting the facts?
Yeah, that's right. We must be wrong. I mean, they're nice people, the media are. Look, we probably should have shared this earlier, but we wanted to get right away to actionable guidance. Tell everybody what to do, right? And we've touched on a related point to this about them not just reporting to Mike's chagrin. Their motivations are different than ours, and they don't see any communication as a conversation. Every communication the media has with us is an interview, in the sense that it could be attributed to us and our firm in their firm's medium. The media are not simply unbiased, uninvolved, disinterested bystanders. There are all kinds of reasons for this, not the least of which is that they work for a capitalistic organization in most cases, just like we do. And drama is what sells ads or draws eyeballs, just like I alluded to a minute ago. Drama is almost always negative. It's rarely positive. Drama, by definition, includes conflict. And for those of us who mistakenly think that the media are simply reporting, consider this. In order to be unbiased, the media would have to present both sides of the story. That means asking us about what our competitors or detractors think and or have said. That means conflict. That means us looking bad unless we say no comment or say positive on our message by repeating it when we have to. You have to understand that it's an underlying principle. It's not purposely. At this point, the media are not just reporting, is not directly, specifically actionable the way no comment is actionable. But we've got to know this so that there is a natural reticence, a natural hesitancy among any professional who's listening to the kind of interactions you're going to have with the media. You have to start with, okay, this person is in the media or could be in the media. I need to be cautious, at least initially.
I think some folks in the media go out of their way to try to reduce conflict during an interview. For example, I've seen very often where the interviewer will ask the interviewee, here's what the opposing view thinks. What do you think about that? And that's a very effective way of reducing conflict.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's have you describe the opposing view one way, and then have your opponent or the person who's against you in some way. And folks, don't think that you're the only person that has no one against you, because believe me, the media can find somebody who has a counterpoint. They may not be against you, but they have a counterpoint. If Horstman and Ozan are the two counterpoints to one another, why don't we get Horstman to characterize what Ozan's view is and Ozan to characterize Horstman's view? The great thing about that is we're going to be wrong, so they can cite our inaccuracies. We're going to be emotional, probably, which means we're going to increase the chances for drama. It is the classic way for us to be caused to look bad is where they're perceived to be in the reasonable guise of presenting both sides of the story. And here's the thing. They don't need to do it accurately. They don't need to represent the other point of view accurately. They tell us what others are thinking or saying. Again, they're just trying to elicit dramatic comments. We need to know how to respond to these to avoid having our discussion become negative. The only reason we should be talking to the press, particularly if we're talking to the press officially in our role as a member of the organization. And by the way, you don't have to be told you're talking to them officially. If they find out you're at XYZ, you are speaking officially for the company, in the same way that if you're a manager and you can fire somebody because you represent the company to that person, the role power that you have internally that is relatively small becomes huge outside the company because you're associated with the firm. So we need to know how to respond. Again, as Wendy's law about this stuff, many of us mistakenly believe we've been asked because we're important enough and we have a desire to appear knowledgeable. That's not the reason we're being asked. We're being asked because they think we'll talk.
Right. Are there any patterns of behavior or talk from reporters or folks from the media that would suggest that this tactic is starting to be employed?
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed in the last 5 years as modern media have exploded, and there's so many good things associated with that. But one of the underlying negatives is 20 years ago, if you were interviewed by someone in the media, they would use these very same phrases. Things like, well, yes, but what do you think about this? Or isn't it possible that? Or you can see where someone might disagree, or some people are saying. 20 years ago, they used these very same phrases, and they did so very reasonably. And it was almost like two professors elegantly, professionally, eruditely describing or declaiming about a particular scientific point of view. Well, let's talk about the other side for a moment. Let's get a full understanding of this for our members and listeners and readers and so on. Great. Those same questions, those same points are being made today, but now they're being made shrilly. Now they're being made in order to draw an emotional response from the interviewee. Now media, and I'm not saying modern media, it's old media and new media have learned. I think new media is the one that pioneered it, but now old media and new media both don't say, well, isn't it possible? They say, but Mr. Horstman, isn't it possible? And there's tonation there's tonal quality that is dripping with sarcasm and with what amounts to attack.
Right. And a 1 in 2 billion chance, I guess it's still possible, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, and yeah, some people are saying, and let's go through them, right? So the first one is, well, yes, but, and this is often followed by, don't you think that? And the reporter is simply, or for that matter, the blogger who is at a dinner party with you and wants to create some drama, and so therefore sees themselves as a bit of a goad, a cattle prod to you to see if they can get you energized around a point. They're simply beginning to argue the other side of the story, whatever it might be. If you're a small company and you're trying to get started, they're going to say something like, well, of course, yes, but you're a very small company and you don't have the resources that XYZ, this multi-billion-dollar company has, right? And that's competition and that's conflict, right? It's totally common in conversation, and yet it's not because the other person would want conflict if they were using it in a conversation. They're just trying to understand your argument more fully. But if you're talking to somebody who has the power to characterize what you say, and believe me, they have the power to characterize what you say, they're wanting you to say something dramatic. And again, that's why we say start with no comment, or if you're gonna stay positive and repeat your point. Another one, right? Isn't it possible? And this is what you were saying, right? Of course, anything's possible. Even if the chances are 1 in 11 billion, not just a billion, but 11 billion, right?
11 billion.
Yeah. But when we say yes here, isn't it possible? We're allowing someone to characterize us as having said, quote, Horstman feels it's possible that this new product could be harmful to the environment, unquote.
Ouch.
They're not going to include our caveat, anything's possible. And then what's going to happen is when there are congressional hearings, and for those of you who haven't testified before Congress, it's a treat. When there are congressional hearings, this is of course a United States viewpoint. Sorry for those international listeners. I'm sure there are equivalents wherever you go, where there are governmental bodies. They're going to say, well, we have a quote here from one of the members of your company that says there could be environmental hazard. So your firm knew. Now the interview or the deposition becomes who knew what by when, right? They're not going to include our caveat that things possible. They're not going to accurately reproduce the scoff or the snort we start with. I mean, seriously, do we want our boss reading that in the Times on Monday morning? The right response to isn't it possible is to repeat our point of view, or gee, maybe no comment. So, the next one of those is you can see where, right? I mean, in other words, let's make it an intellectual argument. You could see where, quote, somebody has a different point of view. This is another classic way to get you to admit that the other side has a point. And look, folks, the other side does have a point, but they don't need us making it for them. Repeat your point again. And my personal favorite is some people are saying, because underneath, when I hear some people are saying, I'm going to just say this,